I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 76th day of the 106th Legislature First Session. Our chaplain for today is Reverend Leah Lawson of St. John's Lutheran Church in Beatrice, Nebraska, Senator Dorn's district. Please rise.
Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for this day. We thank you for all of our government leaders and their staff who have gathered together in this time and in this place to serve all residents of Nebraska. Grant them wisdom and strength as they make difficult decisions. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Lawson. I call to order the 76th day of the 106th Legislature First Session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call.
I have a quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
I have no corrections.
Thank you, sir. Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
Mr. President, just 2 amendments to be printed, LB 720 by Senator Bowles. That's all that I have.
While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose the signer to hereby sign LR 107. Members will move to the agenda. First item is legislative confirmation report. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, the Health and Human Services Committee first reports on 2 appointments to the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing.
Senator Howard, you recognized to open the confirmation report of the HHS Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. This morning I'm bringing you 2 appointments for the Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Both of these candidates are first-time appointments that were advanced unanimously from the Health and Human Services Committee. The first appointment is Frances Beaurivage. Ms. Beaurivage resides in Lincoln and has had many roles in the deaf community, including as an interpreter, instructor, and currently serves part-time in her retirement as a consultant to Boys Town National Research Hospital at their Childhood Center for Deafness. Before she retired, she worked as their full-time managing the National Assessment for Sign Language Interpreters, working in educational interpreting. Ms. Beaurivage is not deaf or hard of hearing, but grew up in a home with both of her parents being deaf. It was that experience that led her to begin a life of service to the deaf community. Frances Beaurivage will make an excellent addition to the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. The next appointment is for Sandra Shaw. Mrs. Shaw resides in Seward and currently works for the Seward County Aging Services. Her tie to the deaf community is that both her husband and her daughter-in-law are deaf. Her husband became deaf as an adult due to an autoimmune disease. It was her experience with that journey that led her to becoming involved in advocacy. The lack of access to everyday activities, and that many people don't understand, is what it's like to be deaf. Both of these candidates will make great additions to the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and I would urge you to vote green to confirm them. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Howard. Is there any discussion of the confirmation report from the Health and Human Services Committee? I see none. Senator Howard, you recognize to close. She weighs closed, and the question for the body is the adoption of the confirmation report from the Health and Human Services Committee. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Members, we're waiting to get the computer situation resolved. Just please stand by. Members, the technology problem has been resolved. Those in favor of the confirmation report of the Health and Human Services Committee, please vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
40 yeas, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the confirmation report.
Confirmation report is adopted.
Mr. President, the second confirmation report I have is from the Health and Human Services Committee regarding an appointment to the Nebraska Rural Health Advisory Commission.
Senator Howard, you're recognized to open on the second of two confirmation reports from the Health and Human Services Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I'm presenting you a confirmation report for Roger Wells to the Nebraska Rural Health Advisory Commission. This confirmation was advanced from the Health and Human Services Committee with a unanimous vote. Mr. Wells is a physician assistant who resides in St. Paul and has been practicing for over 30 years. This is a reappointment as Mr. Wells has served the commission for 20 years. He is active in the National Physicians Assistants Association and also the National Rural Advisory Commission. When asked what his biggest concern was for rural health, he stated that 40 to 50% of providers in rural areas are pre-retirement age. Recruiting medical providers to rural areas is important to ensure the continuum of care. Small communities must be creative in enticing clinicians to live and work in the area. Another challenge he cited is the need for population health in rural areas because many rural citizens don't do maintenance health. Educating citizens to do preventative health to prevent onset of chronic disease is essential. Mr. Wells will continue to be an essential member of the Nebraska Rural Advisory Commission, and I would urge your green vote on his confirmation. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Howard. Debate is now open on the confirmation report. Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the legislature, and welcome back, Senator Howard. You were missed, at least by me for sure. It made me forget my thought. Oh, there's a verse in the Bible that says it refers to people who are ever learning and never coming to a knowledge of the truth. I would like to ask Senator Howard a question.
Senator Howard, you yield, please.
Yes, I will.
Senator Howard, did I understand you to say that this doctor had been practicing for 30 years?
Yes, sir.
And there are lawyers who practice for a longer time than that. Now, the verse I quoted said, forever learning and never coming to a knowledge of the truth. How long will this doctor and others similarly situated have to practice before they become competent at what it is they're doing?
Oh, I couldn't say several years, I would believe, yes.
So is there any period after which we don't say they're practicing? Because it seems to me if you practice anything for 30 years, you ought to be able to do it at the end of 30 years. How do you feel about that?
I would agree with that statement.
Have you ever talked to this gentleman before?
Yes, I have. I've affirmed his appointment before.
If you see him, raise the question to him that I did, and then if he gives you an answer, let me know when he will have practiced long enough to really be whatever it is a person who practices that long is trying to do. But I'm going to support the recommendation you made because I have confidence in you and your judgment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. I see no further discussion. Senator Howard, you recognize the close on the confirmation report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to personally thank Senator Chambers for his remarks about my judgment. That is very helpful for my heart today. Thank you, sir. With that, I would urge the confirmation of Roger Wells to the Nebraska Rural Health Advisory Commission. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Howard. Members, you heard the discussion on the confirmation report from the Health and Human Services Committee. The question before the body is the adoption of the report. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted carry to? Record, please.
43 yeas, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the confirmation report.
The confirmation report is adopted. Pursuant to the agenda, we'll move to general file appropriations bills, LB 610A.
Did you say next item?
Yeah, I'm sorry. LB 610A, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. 610A is a bill by Senator Lindstrom and appropriates funds to implement the provisions of LB 610.
Senator Lindstrom, you're recognized to open on LB 610A.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 610A is an appropriations for the amount of $7,500. This is anticipation of AM 1771 to LB 610, pending approval on select file. This is merely an opportunity for an A bill to catch up to the bill on select file. LB 610 is on the agenda today, and we will go into further detail about the A bill, but I would like to put on record where those two funds are. This is in conjunction, or the groups that will be working together to facilitate this is DHHS and then the State Treasurer's Office to accomplish that $7,500 transfer. DHHS, the fund is program 033, and from the State Treasurer's Office is program 505 under the Education Savings Plan. So those are the dollars that will be moved to accomplish the underlying A bill, and we'll hear 610 later today. So appreciate your green vote to allow 610A to catch up with the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Lindstrom. Is there any discussion on LB 610A? I see none. Senator Lindstrom, you recognize to close. The waves closed, and the question for the body is the advance of LB 610A to E&R initial. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, please record.
Forty-three ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the advancement of LB 610A.
LB 610A advances. Part of the agenda, we'll move to select file. Appropriations Bill, LB 600A. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, 600A, Senator Walls would move to amend the bill with AM 1775.
Senator Walls, you're recognized to open on your amendment to LB 600A.
Amendment 1775 catches up with 600.
Thanks, Senator Walls. Is there any discussion on the amendment, AM 1775 to LB 600A? I see no discussion. Senator Walls, you recognize to close on AM 1775. She waives closed, and the question for the body is the adoption of AM 1775. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, please record.
Ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the advance or adoption of Senator Walz's amendment.
AM 1775 is adopted.
Senator Slama, I
Senator
have
Slama,
nothing
you-
further in the bill.
Mr. President, I move that LB 600A be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 600A advances. Per the agenda, select file budget bills, LB 295. Mr. Clerk. Members, we're obviously having some technical problems this morning. We're going to stand at ease for a bit till we get this resolved. Legislative Bill 295. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Slama, 295, I have no amendments to the bill at this time.
Senator Salami recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 295 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance LB 295 to ENR for engrossing. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 295 advances. Our next bill is LB 296.
296, Senator, I have, now you're going 297. Really? No, it was on my screen. You've got it highlighted, right? Yeah, I got 296 now. Try it. Okay. Senator, 296, I have no amendments to the bill.
Senator Slama for motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 296 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance LB 296 to ENR for engrossing. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 296 advances. Proceeding to LB 297.
Senator, 297, no ENRs. I do have an Appropriations Committee Amendment AM 1747.
Senator Stinner, you recognized to open on the Appropriations Committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Legislature, colleagues, just a refresher on LB 297 introduced by the Speaker at the request of the Governor is part of the Governor's biennial budget recommendations. The bill appropriates funds for the reaffirmed and new construction projects recommended by the Governor for the next biennium. Reaffirmed projects include those projects currently underway that have already received approval and funding previously but are funded over several years. In addition to the new and reaffirmed appropriations set forth in the bill, language is included to provide for the reappropriations of the unexpended June 30th, 2019 appropriation balances for the fiscal year 2019-20 continue to complete the project. The bill contains an emergency clause and becomes operative on July 1st. With your consent, Mr. President, I'd like to move to AM 1747.
Please proceed on AM 1747.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment makes two technical changes to correct the identification of a budget program number and a fund name, as well as another program number and source of funds for appropriation. With that, I would ask that you vote green. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Stinner. Is there any discussion on AM 1747 to LB 297? I see no one wishing to speak. Senator Stinner, you recognized to close on AM 1747. He waives closing. The question for the body is the adoption of AM 1747. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Members, once again, if we could take a vote on AM 1747, those in favor vote aye, those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted care to? Record, please.
40 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the committee amendment.
AM 1747 has been adopted.
I have nothing further on the bill, Senator.
Senator Salama for motion.
Mr. President, I move that LB 297 be advanced to ENR for engrossing.
Members, you heard the motion to advance LB 297 to ENR for engrossing. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. LB 297 advances. Our next bill on the agenda is LB 293.
Senator, I have ENR amendments with respect
Senator
to
Slava?
293.
Mr. President, I move that the ENR amendments to LB 293 be adopted.
Members, you heard the motion. This is a debatable motion. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
I didn't mean to speak on the motion, but I guess I will now. I wanted to rise to talk about how we're funding our government. We had this conversation last week when we discussed the budget, but I think that it's really important for us to go back to that as we're moving through this actually quite quickly today. Our budget package this year is appropriating, I think it's $49 million to expand our prison system. And I find this disappointing and disheartening that we as a body have not worked harder to find solutions to reduce our prison population, to address the mental health crisis in this state, and to provide services to those in need in this state. We have a lot of conversation, debate, philosophical differences about how we approach the business of governing here in Nebraska and how we approach taking care of our citizens. And I hope that moving forward, we can work together to do a better job of having a comprehensive conversation and approach to these things. The individuals in our correction system are people, and most of them, if not all of them, are people who are suffering from poverty, who are suffering from mental health, who are suffering from tragedy, and it's something that we don't talk about. We dehumanize the people that are in our correction systems, and that's unfortunate. We had a Mother's Day weekend, and my children had their little puppet things that are from the New Testament, and one of the little puppet finger things was Pontius Pilate, and it really makes me stop and reflect in my own religion about the importance of not dehumanizing people, because that's what was done to who is considered the leader and the mentor to all Catholics is Jesus Christ, and he was dehumanized by the Romans, and he was crucified for it. And so I think it's really important to remember historically how easy it is for us to dehumanize those in our correction system, and that we can and should do better by them, because these are our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, our children, our mothers, our daughters, our cousins, our aunts, our uncles. These are grandparents, and they deserve our compassion and our care, and they deserve for us to not just throw money at continuing to incarcerate them, but to instead invest in early interventions, in child care subsidies, in food subsidies, in education, in roads, in transportation so that they can get to their jobs, and infrastructure so that there's grocery stores nearby. These are the things that we need to be doing for our citizens, not building more prison beds. I do appreciate that the prison beds that we are building, some of them will be, at least half, I believe, are to address the mental health crisis in our correction system, but we need to be doing more before they get to prison. And right now we're just perpetuating the system, and it's going to ultimately cost the state significantly more dollars by not making these investments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to stand and remind people what we're voting on this LB 293. It's called the deficit bill for the 2019 year, going through June 30th of 2019. And the major item that we discussed the other day is the developmental disability provider error that was done in 2017, where the state had paid its half, and we then paid half of the federal share. This is the final part of the federal payment that we missed out on from not following the federal rules correctly. So this has $2.7 million in it. I had opposed it in the committee at first, but when we had the final discussion about it, there was extra funds from other agencies that were unused, and so that passed on general file, and I do support this bill 293. Just wanted to alert some people who weren't aware what was in this one. This is regarding the special payment for the DD provider error from 2017, and I support LB 293. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Members, the question for the body is the adoption of the ENR amendments. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say Senator Chambers, we're having some technical problems here. We did not realize that your request to speak light was on. We didn't see that. Anyway, Senator Chambers, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, I recognize what it was, but before they took the voice vote, I wanted to indicate that I would like to speak. So I didn't feel like there was anything in the way of a conspiracy, but I should tell you all one thing. You pray every morning, but this morning you offended the God of the machine. You take for granted that these computers are always going to work the way they're supposed to, but I just on a whim said, can we show them something this morning that because something which always has been a certain way will not necessarily always be that way? Could you just on a couple of occasions when they push those buttons, let there be no response from you in the same way there's no response to the God that they pray to every morning? Can you do that for me? And I did not get a response, just like you all don't. But since actions or inaction speak louder than words, it was shown that the God of the computer will respond if one who's on the proper wavelength will make that request. But there is something that I would like to say on the bill, in case I can't finish it because I have an article I want to read. In view of the fact that Senator Kavanaugh had raised some issues other than just the dollars and cents, I have a comment or two I'd like to make. The past few days, I have not brought up the subjects that I had been doing earlier in the session, the discrimination and lack of concern about the LGBTQ community, the fact that people who are on the margins of society are not given what I consider to be appropriate consideration by us as a legislature. So now that the opportunity presents itself on a money bill, that's probably the most opportune time to speak, because here is something, a couplet came to me. Maybe it's the God of rhyme. Here is something that's very funny. Christians won't act for love of God, but they will for love of money. So while we're talking about money, then some other issues can creep in. And I have an article that I want to read, but I think I will wait until I'm recognized before I start it so I won't run out. So on this time, Mr. President, I'm ending this, and then when I'm recognized, I'll complete it. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Slama.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to yield my time to Senator LaGrone. Oh, okay, then I waive. I waive.
She waives the opportunity. Senator Chambers, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President, you know that your God is not at work here because the Bible says your God is not the author of confusion, but the God of the computer is. And that is the God, I think, who is in charge this morning. And because of that, you may pay attention to this article. It appeared in the Lincoln Journal-Star, May 10th. The caption or headline that was put on it, "Some people just don't matter much." This will be particularly relevant in view of the fact that we moved that bill to prohibit shackling female prisoners under certain circumstances. There are, and this is written by Leonard Pitts, who is a columnist with the Miami Herald. There are people who do not matter much. That's a painful truth, starkly at odds with our Jeffersonian creed and national mythology. But it is a truth nevertheless, one frequently proven in actions if denied in words. In this country, by dint of race, gender, class, or status, some people just don't seem to matter. Apparently, Tammy Jackson is one of them. No other conclusion is possible after reading the May 3rd letter her public defender, Howard Finkelstein, sent to Broward County, Florida, Sheriff Gregory Toney. In it, he decries the, quote, outrageous and inhumane, unquote, treatment accorded his client in a Broward lockup. And if anything, the lawyer is guilty of understatement. He says Jackson, who has mental illness, went into labor before dawn on April 10th while alone in an isolation cell. Here's a woman so far along in her pregnancy that she can go into labor, and they put her in an isolation cell. And as soon as I saw that, I knew she had to be black, because we are not deemed to be human beings. But to continue, to back up, he says Jackson, who has mental illness, went into labor before dawn on April 10th while alone in an isolation cell. He says she cried out for help, but guards did not come to see about her, much less take her to the hospital. Instead, they phoned the jail's on-call doctor. It took 4 hours to reach him, and even then, he showed no particular urgency, saying he would check on Jackson when he got to work. Here's some racist white doctor hired by the prison who says when he's notified that this woman is going into labor in an isolation cell, he'll check on her when he gets to work. That's why money should not just be given over to these corrections wherever they occurred. Continuing, but the letter alleges he never did check on this woman. Maybe I should have started by saying this is about a white woman. Then you all would listen. But there are people out there who will listen. Indeed, no one did. No one gave her anything for pain. No one tried to control the bleeding. She screamed all night long, "Help me, somebody! Help me! Help me now! I'm in pain. I'm bleeding. I'm in labor." You listened, didn't you? You listen if I raise my voice, don't you? That's what has to happen when white people are involved. So if it's necessary to raise my voice to emphasize a point, I shall do it. She screamed all night long, and no one came. Jackson was found in her cell, cradling her baby 6 hours and 54 minutes after she first cried out for help.
1 minute.
See, that's what white people love. This is a black woman being tortured, and that torture, unremitting, will go on for 6 hours. And the white people enjoyed it. They probably got sexual gratification, because psychiatrists have shown that those who inflict pain get sexual gratification from that, and that's why they pick certain people who are perverted to be professional torturers, because it works to the good of everybody except the victim being tortured. And I have my light on, so I'll stop for now and then continue when I'm recognized.
Senator Chambers, you're next in the queue. This is your third opportunity.
Continuing. And if you wonder how such a thing could happen, don't. After all, Jackson is a prisoner charged with possession of cocaine and drug paraphernalia, trespassing and sleeping on a public street in a nation still using its criminal justice system to treat a public health crisis. She is indigent enough to need a public defender. She lives with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, according to what her mother told CNN, and she is black. That's the critical word. So how could it happen? How could it not? Does that strike you as harsh? Does it indict too sharply the high-flown words carved in marble over the courthouse door, those noble sentiments about blind justice and equality before the law, and I add with liberty and justice for all? BS. Maybe you haven't been paying attention. After all, under the same system of justice that allegedly brutalized Jackson, a man who raped a 14-year-old girl was just set free by a judge in upstate New York, while a judge in Georgia showed equal lenience to a man who raped a teenage girl and imprisoned her in a dog cage. And the rape kit backlog, the number of rape evidence cases piling up, unopened, because nobody has bothered to test them. It stands north of 150,000 nationwide. And never forget that billionaire Jeffrey Epstein molested dozens, maybe hundreds of underage girls and got a 13-month sentence in a private wing of the local jail with 12 hours furlough 6 days a week. Meantime, Tammy Jackson allegedly gives birth alone in her cell. Internal Affairs is investigating. Maybe heads will roll, but that will not resolve nor even address the thing that makes this feel like such an epic betrayal. After all, this is not Cuba. This is not North Korea. This is not Syria. This is the United States of America. Things like this are not supposed to happen here, but they do, and they always will until enough of us decide otherwise and vote otherwise. For the record, did you say time?
No, I did not.
Oh, for the record, Jackson's daughter is named Miranda Latrice Nixon. In photos, she has a full head of curly hair and lies sleeping in a blanket. She is precious and beguiling, as all newborns are, but don't be fooled. This is a little black girl, born to indigence, a ward of the state at a month old. In America, remember, some people just don't seem to matter. Her mom is one of them. And she, the child, is too. And y'all wonder why I am upset when you talk about this rag and liberty and justice for all, and these are the things happening to black women right now. And you want me to be simple-minded like you all are? It's not liberty and justice for people of my complexion, even one who is going into labor and screaming for help in a Christian country. BS. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Chambers, for reading that woman's story. I think that's really important, and it calls to mind the fact that she had a baby, and for 6 hours that baby did not receive medical attention is egregious, and something that everyone in this body should find just horrific. The thought of having a medical provider right there and that medical provider not seeing her is heartbreaking. I've mentioned before, when I had my eldest daughter, Della, I suffered from postpartum hemorrhaging. If I had been unattended for 6 hours, I would have been dead. I would have been dead. There's nothing that would have told anyone in that facility that that woman wasn't suffering from postpartum hemorrhaging. They weren't checking on her. They could have found her dead in her own blood with a baby. 6 hours is egregious. 6 hours to have a woman unattended after she's given birth, when there are people there ignoring her. Thank you, Senator Chambers, for calling attention to that. Thank you, Senator Chambers, for yelling to get the attention of this body. You mentioned that this woman was black, and I try to think of a situation in which a white pregnant woman would be in that same situation, and I just can't, because a white pregnant woman who goes to jail for a drug possession charge, would probably be knocked down to a misdemeanor, not a felony. A white woman who's pregnant in prison would be taken to a hospital to give birth. This wouldn't happen if she were white. Certainly she wouldn't have been treated well, but she wouldn't have been left alone for 6 hours with a newborn. It's disappointing that the body isn't paying attention to this conversation. It's disappointing that we keep having conversations about the wrong things. We're not talking about the people that are impacted by our legislation. The power that we wield in this body is great, and the people's lives that we impact with this body are important and significant, no matter who they are. There's been a lot of talk about babies, unborn babies, children, but I don't see that people are putting actions behind that. I don't see people voting in favor of supporting children. There's so many more ways to support children than just telling a doctor what they have to say to their patient. There's providing food for those children, providing education, providing safe child care, making sure that there's transportation for families to get from jobs into school safely. I hope that this body will reflect on this conversation today, and that we will continue to work and be better than this. We have big problems to solve, and we can't solve them by ignoring them, and we can't solve them by dehumanizing these people, these women, these men, these children. Thank you, Mr. President. If he would like, I'll yield the remainder of my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, if you care to use it, there's a minute and a half.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the legislature, and I have a motion up there. I'm going to show you how I can make you all pay attention if I choose to do it. This woman cried out for help, and she went 6 hours and 54 minutes before any help came. Do you all think I can take 6 hours and 54 minutes of your time today if I choose to? Is that what it's going to take for me to get your attention? To make you listen and pay attention? Give you a little bit of discomfort and unease for 6 hours and 54 minutes? Let's make it an even 7 hours. Let's say it's 10 o'clock now, 5 o'clock. Oh, but then we have to take time off for eating because you all like to eat also, to ease the pain in your belly when you haven't had enough food. So I'm thinking about whether or not I should test myself, test your patience, test this system by just taking 7 hours out of one day. But it's also 7 hours or one day away from those few remaining in this session.
It's time.
You said time?
That's time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Slama.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since today's discussion, or this morning's discussion, is about the budget and what we as a state are spending, I'd like to get back to that. There was a study posted by Wallet Hub in March labeled 2019 Tax Rates by State that compared the collective local and state tax rates for the U.S. median household. Now, the U.S. median household was calculated as an income equal to $58,000, owns a home valued at $193,500, which is the median U.S. home value, owns a car valued at $24,350, the highest selling car of 2018, and spends annually an amount equal to the spending of a household earning the median U.S. income. I understand that this may not be the median income for Nebraska, but this is the standard used to compare states to each other. Now, I was surprised to find that Nebraska was not ranked in the top 10 for best states for taxpayers, was not ranked in the top 20, wasn't ranked in the top 30, wasn't ranked in the top 40. In fact, in a ranking of 50 states plus the District of Columbia, we ranked 47th of 51 in total local and state tax on the average, on the median U.S. household. We were in front of only Illinois, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and New York. Folks, we were 47th out of 51 in total tax burden nationwide. Our median U.S. household faces a tax of 13.37% annually. We rank 44th when it comes to real estate tax rate at a rate of about 6%. Vehicle property tax rate, we rank 36 at an average of $387 per year. We rank 19th on average income tax rate, and we rank 30th on sales and excise tax rank, which I think is important to note as we look at increasing our state's sales tax. But I think it's important to note as we discuss the budget that at the root of every taxation issue is a spending problem. So I'm looking forward to today looking at some parts of the budget we may see as wasteful, looking for places to cut, because folks, 47th out of 51 just isn't going to cut it. And with that, I would like to yield the remainder of my time to Senator Chambers if he would like to continue his discussion.
Senator Chambers, roughly 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Slama, and I would like to continue. There are too many things that happen on this floor that remind me of what it means to be black. How you all don't have to worry about certain things. You don't get up in the morning and wonder what kind of slight or insult either you will confront or somebody who will call your office will tell you about. Black people still hold a degraded second or third class status in this society. With all of the fine words in the Declaration of Independence, see, you all started me when I was young and in school, thinking that there was something special about this country, when I, in the 5th grade, memorized the entire Declaration of Independence. A lot of it has slipped away because I had no reason to remember it after that feat was done. But some of the words ring in my mind like a fire alarm bell. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever a government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the duty of the people to alter or to abolish it and provide new guards for their future security. How many white kids learned that? How many white adults even know it now? You hold those things out to us. And it's like the football in Charlie Brown, that mean little girl, and they make the little girl the meanest one for a purpose, that conditioning. She holds the football, and then when Charlie Brown, you said time?
That's time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hunt, was your speaking light on? Senator, no. Okay, I see no one else in the queue. There's a motion pending at the desk, but before we get to the motion, we'll dispense with the E&R amendments. Those in favor of adopting the E&R amendments, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. The E&R amendments are adopted. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Chambers would move to indefinitely postpone the bill.
Senator Chambers, recognized to open on your motion.
There's a song that I'm not going to sing. Now it begins. And there's an old rhyme. Needles and pins, needles and pins. When a girl gets married, her trouble begins. Men engineer all these hateful things. Men are the ones who created slavery. But back to what a black man experiences in this country, not every black man. The world is what we perceive it to be. A principle of psychology says, if a person perceives something as being real, it is real to that person in its consequences. Mine is not just a perception, mine is a recognition of the day-to-day realization and observation with reference to what happens to people of my complexion. And here's the irony about you all's country. When I say my complexion, it could be as pale as yours, or as dark as this. When a black person says my complexion, you know that that does not necessarily have reference to color. Because white people create psychological, political constructs that go contrary to reality. If you saw a picture of my mother, and one day I may let some of you all see a picture of my mother, you'd think she's one of you all. She's got hair redder than the reddest hair of anybody who's ever been in this legislature. She had hazel eyes, and her complexion was so pale that when she was an older person, and I met her in the grocery store where we both shop, I embraced her. A black man said, "Chambers, man, what you doing hugging that old white woman?" I said, "Brother, you need to be careful how you speak and know what it is you speak of before you let words come out of your mouth. That old white woman is my mother." "Oh, Chambers, man, I didn't know. I'm sorry." I said, "That's what I said. You didn't know." Now, he was as much a victim of racism in this country as anybody else. So, There are black people, complexion-wise. That's why I say if I were blacker, I could be prouder. Because some of you all think we want to look like you. That I put chemicals in my hair to make it look like your hair. And yet, ironically, I saw some device on television, this white woman was using it, and she has hair straight, hanging down her head like it was just wet. You know that wet dog-like hair? It just hangs straight. And she put this thing, it looked like a pair of pliers, but they were heated, on her hair and pulled it down. And when she let it go, her hair went boing and sprung up, and it said curls. Curly hair. White woman trying to get curly hair. Some black people trying to, don't hush the baby up. That's the purest sound we will hear on this floor. If ever I'm speaking and a baby cries or a baby makes any sound, let me hear that sound to remind me that there is something living in this world, born of a man and woman, which is pure, more innocent, more of an example than anything walking in shoe leather as a member of this legislature. So it doesn't offend me when the baby makes the sound of a baby. And that brings me to a point that I can make about little Italian babies. See, when this country was talking about keeping people out, the people who are not worthy, who are not fit to come to this so-called white country, but they didn't know their history. The people who founded America were from what the British call the convict debtor classes. Convicts and debtors were sent to America, and they were given a choice. Given a choice. You could either hang in England or go to America. And some chose to be hanged. But others chose America because, as Khrushchev said, living things want to go on living. When they got here, some lived here as they did in England, off the work and labor of others. They were thieves, they were robbers, they were burglars, and laws had to be passed to deal with these British people who had come to America rather than be hanged in England. So the fathers and mothers of this country came from the convict debtor classes in England. Australia was another prison colony where the British scum, as they were called by the British, were sent so that they wouldn't contaminate pure British society. So many of these criminals were sent to America during the colonial days that Benjamin Franklin and a group of his cohorts wrote a letter to King George III and said, stop sending these criminals over here, because no sooner have we incorporated one group of them into society and got them to behave halfway like civilized people, half Christianized people. You send us another group of them. So with this letter, I am sending you a crate of rattlesnakes to equate with the types of people you send to this country. You didn't know that was in your history, did you? You didn't know you came from convict debtors, did you? But all of these people, and when I say all, not every single individual, but these people in America began to talk about God having ordained them to own this land, and therefore they could slaughter the natives who were considered inhuman animals. And the concept of scalping came from white people because there was a bounty on native people, and when you presented a scalp, you collected the bounty. Who do they tell you does the scalping? What do they show you in the movies? They put their wrongfulness on others. There was a man, he was a high-ranking official in Massachusetts, and he talked about how on almost any day, you could walk down the streets and smell the heads of these, they called natives in those days savages, and they spelled it with an L. The heads of these savages frying in pans on the street, and others of their heads were being kicked down the street like a football. That's what they were doing, and they wrote about it, just like the Nazis who operated the death camps wrote in lurid detail about the infliction of tortures against Jews. And the Nazis are considered to this very day to be bad people, but the Americans want to say they're better than everybody. They've whitewashed their history. They don't want their history taught, and that's why when we had that Americanism bill before you, and you wanted to keep the mythology of America going, you would not accept amendments that were designed to bring truth into the teaching of American civics, because it's not truth you want, it's propaganda. So here's what they did. When they decided that more people, such as themselves, may see fit to try to come to America, they had to find a way to keep them out. And you know the ones they didn't want in here? They didn't want Italians, as they called them. Didn't want Italians. Didn't want any of the Eastern Europeans, because the Eastern Europeans were the savage people. They weren't quite as civilized as those in Britain or the United Kingdom. Britain, Wales, Scotland. The other areas considered Western Europe. So they passed laws against them. And those who were against these inferior people coming here said, oh yes, when the Italians are little, they are beautiful, delightful little babies, like all little babies are delightful, but they grow up into big, full-grown Italians, and therefore none can come here. There were some people who did not like that idea, and as is the case today, and as the Bible said, there will always be a remnant. There were people who stood against this racist, discriminatory attitude. They tried to remind these people who now felt they were better than everybody else what their forebears suffered in Europe and when they first came to America, like some of your forebears did. But you carry on the racist traditions. Why do you think a racist, white nationalist person could be elected president?
That's time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Before proceeding, Senator Friesman would like to announce some guests today. We have with us 60 fourth graders from Lincoln Elementary School in Grand Island, Nebraska. With the Lincoln Elementary fourth graders up in the north balcony, please rise. I'd like to welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. Continuing debate, Senator Bowles.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that Senator Chambers has a few things on his mind this morning, but I just want to rise and articulate how ill-advised it is to indefinitely postpone or make motions to reconsider or recommit any of the budget bills. These bills are our most important responsibility. It's the only thing we're actually required to do, and there are significant consequences if we don't move this budget package forward. So I stand in opposition to the indefinitely postponed motion, and I want to raise 2 points related to LB 293 that show just how important this piece of legislation is. The first is LB 293 contains the funds that we reimburse to localities for the homestead exemption. The homestead exemption, of course, is for lower income seniors and other folks who are on fixed incomes, and those dollars are very important to their financial stability. The other thing I want to draw the body's attention to is everyone on your desk should have what we call as the green sheet, which is our current financial status. If I could ask you to turn your attention to line 5, it references LB 293, which says that we would lapse FY18 appropriations to the tune of $27 million. In other words, those unspent funds that can be used to help us balance our budget. Line 22 has the $2.3 million expenditure, which is to say that in the third line over, rather than having a positive $1.9 million, we'd have a negative $23 million if we didn't pass this bill forward. So in an effort to be fair-minded and even-handed, even though I have great respect for my colleague, Senator Chambers, I do need to rise and articulate just how unwise it is to consider an indefinitely postponed motion for the sake of the budget as a whole. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Bowles. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I have a couple things on my mind, and it seems like a good time to talk about it because it relates to the budget, it relates to spending, it relates to economic incentives, and it relates to corrections. In an article written by Paul Hamill in the World Herald on March 19th, headline, Nebraska prison population hits new high, quote, I hope it's an anomaly, corrections chief says. Here's a record Nebraska leaders didn't want to set, a new high for prison overcrowding. On Monday, state prisons held 5,515 inmates, the most in history, and a surprising landmark in light of several efforts to reduce overcrowding. I hope it's an anomaly, State Corrections Director Scott Frakes told a panel of state lawmakers. It means that state prisons are holding 2,140 more inmates than they were designed to handle, about 2 prisons worth, and are at 163% of capacity, the second worst overcrowding in the nation. It also, blah, 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 goes on. We went a long time in Nebraska without investing in the correction system, he said, Frakes said. We're paying the price for that. I support funding improvements to our prison system. I think that inmates need more connection to their communities. I think that from what I have heard from incarcerated people who have reached out to me, who I worked with before I was elected, the quality of rehabilitation in Nebraska could be increased, and maybe that's something that takes appropriation of more funds. But I want us to be careful about saying, well, we funded more we gave more funding to corrections, so they're able to build more beds, we're able to build more prisons, boom, therefore we solve the overcrowding problem. That's really the wrong solution to the problem. I think that one thing that would really help this, and also be a great economic incentive for our state, is legalizing cannabis and legalizing marijuana and allowing people with drug convictions to clear or modify their records, because there are so many people in our prisons with nonviolent, who are convicted for nonviolent crimes, who are convicted for drug use and possession, and we in this body didn't allow them to apply for SNAP benefits. That's something that would really help rehabilitate them and keep them out of our corrections system in a time that I just told you from this article in the World Herald, and we all know this as leaders in this body, we can't put more people into our prisons. And I think that the wrong solution for us is, it's not right for us to say, well, let's give them more funding so we can lock more people up. The right solution for us is to say, what are some bigger policy questions that we could come together and look at in Nebraska that would attract more people to our state, increase our revenue, give us more funds to work with, and help empty some of those beds instead of trying to fill them up with people and give them opportunities for rehabilitation, like SNAP, like raising the tipped minimum wage, like making sure that LGBTQ people can't be fired for who they are in Nebraska, like investing in regional public transportation, like expanding Medicaid. All of these things will not only reduce our prison population, but they will attract more people to our state. And so I wanted to say that on the record today because I'm not inclined to support increases in spending for corrections until I see the political will in this body to balance, thank you, to balance that increase in funding with an increase in proactive, forward-facing policy to help incarcerated people and inmates be successful, whether they're going to be incarcerated for a long time or whether they're going to come back out into society and live life like everybody else and be in the world. And we want them to be successful. We want them to be taxpayers. We want them to be entrepreneurs. We want them to have families. We want them to be participants in their communities. And just funding more beds is a very short-sighted way of addressing that problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Hunt. Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I'm in accord with what Senator Hunt said. I'm sympathetic to what Senator Bowles said, but I have a greater responsibility on me this day. I'm going to read a paragraph again from this article. No one gave her anything for pain. No one tried to control the bleeding. She screamed all night long, and no one came. Jackson was found in her cell cradling her baby 6 hours and 54 minutes after she first cried out for help. Were there no guards on duty? You think they couldn't tell that a woman on the verge of giving birth was pregnant? Why would they put her in solitary confinement and nobody checked on her? They could anticipate what her problem would be, and yet what I'm reading about happened to that woman. The Bible said that after Cain had killed Abel, the voice of God was walking in the garden and asked Cain, "Where is thy brother?" And Cain responded, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Well, where were the keepers of this woman? Did she count for nothing? Less than nothing? If any of these people owned a pet, and that pet were crying out in pain, I believe that any one of those persons who was the pet owner would have done something to find out what was the cause of the pain and would try to find a way to alleviate it, which means that a black woman who is pregnant on the verge of delivering was beneath an animal. What about all of the pro-life? All of that about you care about a fetus, you care about a zygote, you care about anything that is in the womb, but you don't care about a black woman who has all of that in her womb. Your so-called pro-life principles, if that's what they can be called, are as much a mockery as these outcries about the existence of democracy in this country. They mean nothing. And the people who are situated as this woman was situated will be swept aside because more important things have to be done. Maybe we in the legislature have to legalize medical marijuana. Maybe if this woman had been administered some kind of medication, her pain could have been lessened. But maybe those who would be interested in legalizing medical marijuana wouldn't have any concern about a woman situated as this woman. What about industrial hemp, where I understand the prosecutors are trying to create a criminal offense in connection with that product because they cannot stand to lose and the governor cannot either. So these are the things that engage you all. So I'm going to have to find a way to take considerable time on every bill that comes up this morning. I don't care what the subject is. Those bills mean something to you. There are things related to human beings that mean a lot more to me than any bill before us, even these bills that relate to the budget. What would happen if we don't pass any budget bills this session? First of all, that's not going to happen. But if it happened, what would happen? We, by a vote of a certain number, can extend the session of the legislature. The governor can call us into special session. If the governor called us into special session, he is allowed to restrict the subject matter that we can consider. It would be only the budget. And he could keep us here until we pass the budget bill. So that is not something that anybody has to worry about. The budget bills will pass. All these other bills can be introduced next session. You all put so much into these bills that they become of the warp and woof of who and what you are. Passing a bill means more than doing those things that should help the people that we supposedly are passing these bills for. In a race between a human being and something else, the human being never wins the race, unless it's a white human being racing against any person considered to be one of color.
That's time. Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Senator Hunt's comments stirred me to action. In my first year here in 2015, we passed LB 605. And of course, that bill is designed to reduce the prison overcrowding that we have. And I think most of us know that we're second only to Alabama. We're sitting at 160% currently, and that's nothing to be proud of. That is unbelievable. In fact, ACLU has a court suit against us, and unless we reduce the prison population, we will end up facing the bad effects of that court suit. We've had bills come before this body that helps people coming out of prison. SNAP benefits, Medicaid, things like that. We need to do a better job with those programs because those people coming out of prison, we don't want them to return. And that's the problem that we seem to have in this state. We do need to do a better job with this issue. Senator Lathrop is eloquent in this, and we need just to buckle down, work with the governor, and let's reduce the prison population. Thank you, Senator Hunt, for your comments, and let's hope that the body itself rises to the occasion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator McAllister. Senator Chambers, you recognize your third opportunity.
You all listen to songs. Was there a song, How Many Roads Must a Man Walk Down Before He's Called a Man? How many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? They asked these questions, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and then the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Things are not going to change unless people change them. People are not going to change them unless the people who are supposed to make the changes change, but they're not going to do it. I know it. You all know it. There was a verse in the Bible that said if these people didn't speak, the stones would rise up and speak. Periodically, I prevent the stones from speaking and terrifying all you Christians by saying those things that need to be said. The thing I regret is that you Christians won't say what your Christian leader told you to say, except Christ was not a Christian. Christ was not a Christian. Christ didn't call those who followed him Christians. The Christians were not known to Christ. The disciples were first called Christians at Antioch. Jesus was long gone by then. Where was Jesus? He had flown away. He said, I can't stand it down there with those hypocrites. And if I do, I will do to them talking to his Father. Daddy, you going to tell me that I got to go down here and die for these creatures? They're going to kill me. Why don't you let me do to these what you did to all of them in Noah's day? There are some women we can save because they're the ones who never deserted him completely. Although they stood some distance away, they didn't flee as it said the disciples fled. You talk all of this religion, you articulate all these principles, but they mean nothing because when we're able to do things with our vote to help the people we pretend to care about, we don't do it. I heard what Senator McAllister said. I was here so many years ago that they had what looked like a Bastille that was called a prison. The cells were segregated, and the black prisoners got the worst end of the deal, even in prison. And I led an effort to tear down that prison and build the one that is there now. I led the effort. And there was a firm in those days known as Q-Tac Rock, and then they added Camel. One of their people who dealt with corrections wrote me a letter, and I still have it somewhere, saying, Senator Chambers, don't stop. You're on the cutting edge of what is starting to happen now, and it's called prison reform. They didn't even have a word for it that was popular at that time, but I was in the forefront. And I spent more time at that prison than I did in the legislature, and embarrassed and humiliated my colleagues, because in those days there were reporters who would write about these things at length. There was at least one editorial writer, Dick Herman, who took note of what I was doing and knew that a change needed to occur. There was an old person named Terry Carpenter who had these white senators in terror. They called him Terrible Terry. He became persuaded that what I said was true, and he got on board, and we were able to bring about a change in the entire prison system. I visited the women's prison. They had no books to speak of, no recreation. I got somebody, I forget whether it's somebody who owned a pool hall or somebody who could get it, to get a pool table and donate it to the women's prisons. There were several bookstores who took their paperbacks and tore the covers off and marked them so that they couldn't be sold by the prison people, and gave me boxes to take and give to the women at the women's prison. Oh, you didn't know I did that? They didn't even have a legal library out at the men's prison until I spoke about it on the floor, and the then head of the Nebraska Bar Association got together to get some books to put in that prison. You all don't know who has done things that have brought this state to where it is now. People think this state is progressive because of things that I've done that I had to fight tooth and nail to try to get done. And we still, as a legislature, will not do the right thing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. Senator Chambers, you recognize to close on your IPP motion.
Thank you. And I'm going to have a call of the House and a roll call vote, and I'm going to be not voting so I can make a motion to reconsider, and I don't have to bother my brain with trying to draft amendments. I told you all about the things that I did for you all so you can get some expense money while you're in session. There was a time when our staff members didn't get paid much of anything. And there was one year when I was able to persuade the legislature that despite the relatively small percentage amount we were giving to others, we should give ours an 11% increase. It had never been heard of. Because I would argue that 11% of very little may not be as much as 2% of a lot more. But anyway, that started moving our staff closer to what other staff members in the other branches got. I was the one who pushed to give a long weekend on Easter to our employees. One time I didn't make it to the exec board meeting where we took a vote on that, and they didn't vote to do it. Some of the employees came to me and told me what happened, so I got a piece of paper and went around to all the members of the board and got them to sign it so that we would give the long weekend. I'm looking out for white people. White people didn't look out for their own kind, and they are not kind to others who are not members of their kind. This place was virtually uncivilized when I got here. I can show you all letters and editorials different from the kind that are written now by people who don't know what went on in the early days of my coming to this place and the changes that I brought about. But white people didn't mind those changes because they benefited white people. Well, now, I'm the same person that I was then, but there are still people who need help. And I am stronger in my criticism now because you've had some decades when you should have become a bit more civilized and imbued with more understanding. And that's why where much is known, much is required. And your Bible said, he that knew his master's will and did it not shall be beaten with many stripes, because you knew better and didn't do better. You all know better, but you're not going to do better because you feel you don't have to. And in reality, you don't, because you're in the majority and you go along with whatever the majority wants. That's why, and sometimes I digress to draw you all within the ambit of what I'm talking about, Trump is doing things that are hurting a lot of people in agriculture in this state. The Farm Bureau will cry and moan about what's happening, especially for those growing soybeans and other grain. And although there was one comment about the price of beef actually kind of rebounding and it's good, well, in the Asian part of the world, there are going to be some cutbacks on buying beef and pork. Then they're going to start crying just like the grain growers are now. A banker's not going to loan you money because you've got all these thousands of bushels of soybean in a silo that nobody wants to buy. But these farmers in Nebraska will not speak against what Trump is doing because he's their leader. The most important thing is that he is a racist, and as long as he appeals to racism, they will go along with anything he says, even though it hurts them financially. And now I'm glad that the tariffs are going to hit laptops and these things that all you sophisticated people do, and the price is going to be paid by you. Your president is so stupid that he's praising the fact that money is flowing into the American Treasury from the tariffs, but guess who's paying that money that's flowing into the Treasury? The Americans who are paying the increased costs. Chinese are not hurting. You're not sucking money from the Chinese. You are sucking it out of Americans' pockets, and if they had a tax that was as high as what they're going to pay because of these tariffs, they'd want to run everybody out of office who did it. But you're so dumb, you don't know how tariffs work. You don't realize that they're hurting you. But when it dawns on you, will it be too late? Who can say? None are so blind as those who will not see. You all are the willfully blind. You're the willfully ignorant, so that you won't have to assume any moral responsibility for delivering on the oath that you voluntarily swore. But why should you be expected to uphold an oath when you tell lies and do other things when you're campaigning to get into this office? Then you sell out even when you get in this office.
It's time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like a call of the House and a roll call vote.
It's been a request to place House on a call. The question is, shall the House go on a call? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
17 ayes, 2 nays to place the House under call.
Members of the House is under call. All senators, please return to your desk and check in. The House is under call. All unexcused senators, please return to the chamber. The House is under call. Unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. Senator Morpho, check in, please. Senator Linehan, check in, please. Senator Hunt, check in, please. All members are now present. The question for the body is the adoption of Senator Chambers' motion to indefinitely postpone the bill. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Arch, voting no. Senator Blood, voting no. Senator Bowles, voting no. Senator Bostelman, voting no. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting no. Senator Breese, voting no. Senator Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Chambers, not voting. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Crawford, voting no. Senator DeBoer, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator Erdman, not voting. Senator Friesen, voting no. Senator Geist, voting no. Senator Gregert, voting no. Senator Groney, voting no. Senator Holleran, voting no. Senator Ben Hansen, voting no. Senator Matt Hansen, voting no. Senator Hilgers, voting no. Senator Hickelman, voting no. Senator Howard, voting no. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Hunt, voting no. Senator Kalowski, voting no. Senator Coulterman, voting no. Senator LaGrone, voting no. Senator Lathrop, voting no. Senator Lindstrom, voting no. Senator Linehan, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator McAllister, voting no. Senator McDonald, voting no. Senator Morfeld, voting no. Senator Moser, voting no. Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Pansy Brooks, voting no. Senator Quick, voting no. Senator Scheer, voting no. Senator Slama, voting no. Senator Stinner, voting no. Senator Vargas, voting no. Senator Walls, voting no. Senator Wayne, voting no. Senator Williams, voting no. Senator Wishart, voting no. 0 ayes, 47 nays.
The The motion is not adopted. I raise the call. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, before we proceed, the Appropriations Committee will have an executive session under the north balcony now. Senator Chambers would move to reconsider the vote just taken.
Senator Chambers, you're recognized to open on your reconsideration motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to give you all a chance to get out of this. Majority is not always right, but the majority will rule. Now, you're only going to get one chance only. I can either continue indefinitely, or I can just take the time for the rest of this morning's session. All of those who want me to take time just for this morning's session and not consider it this afternoon, and I might close my eyes, raise your hand. I see 3. That's not a majority under any circumstance. 4. Okay, that's it. You had your chance. The polls are closed. You lost. You've given me now a vote to continue beyond this morning. And seldom do I let what I do be decided by a vote of the legislature. But when the legislature feels so strongly about something that they will vote against their own interest for a change, who am I to frustrate the will of the legislature of which I am a part? So you all mark this day down, May 14th, when Senator Chambers allowed the legislature by vote to determine what his conduct was going to be. And those of you who were on the short end of the vote, imagine how you'd feel if that's where you were the majority of the time, on issues that meant a great deal to you. You would decide how you're going to react to it. And we respond to the reality that we perceive based on the kind of person we are. Each one of us is a product, as I've suggested to you all, of our background, our upbringing, our education, if we have any, our experiences, the friendships we may develop, the battles we may have to wage. All these things unite to make us what we are. But what I am, more than anything else, is what I am. That's why Popeye and I said, the words that will stand true for all time and all climes. I am what I am, and that's all that I am. If you look into those words, it will tell you that even if I should be a good enough actor to fool everybody, as people on this floor will do from time to time, I still am what I am. The hypocrite was just the one who wore the mask. That word by itself was not necessarily bad. Then it took on the meaning of one who hides what he or she really is behind a mask in order to do something which is deemed inappropriate. So everything I'm doing could be an act, but you won't know it. You have no way of knowing it. What I'm saying, I want in the record. And I want it to be in the record at a time we're discussing something that means something to all of you, and that's money. Some people, Senator Hanson B., mistake a verse in the Bible. They say money is the root of all evil, but the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil, because another verse says money answereth all things. So properly utilized, money can bring about some very worthwhile and necessary actions on the part of society, on the part of organizations, on the part of individuals. So you should be like what Paul told young Timothy. Study thyself show thyself approved, a workman of God who needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Here a little, there a little, line upon line. You put these things together and you come up with a concept. But the concept alone is not enough. You all talk about having faith. The governor is said to be a man of faith. He calls himself a man of faith. But what did the Bible say? Faith without works is dead. So when you hear somebody say, I'm a person of faith, that lets you know that person is a sepulcher, a tomb filled with dead things. If you don't practice the things you say you believe, you are that hypocrite. And there's one who sees you and knows you. I don't know what you're thinking. In general, I do. And on this floor, I know what you're going to do based on certain issues, like Senator LaGrone. I understand he's out there running around trying to hurt something on the next bill. The rate we're giving to providers. After you all voted for those rates, he's running around here trying to stop it. And he'll have the chance when that bill comes up to say that's not true, that he supports those rates for providers. And you'll have a chance to vote that way. And you'll be able to show that I was mistaken. But we shall see what we shall see, shall we not? And when a senator is given the job of running around here trying to carry out the governor's will, what do you think that shows? What do you think that shows? The dog whistle has been blown. Dogs can hear things that human ears cannot, because dogs have to hear things that human beings don't have to hear in order to survive. Hanson B. understands that under the principle of evolution, every evolutionary change that occurs is designed to enhance the survival of the species, not just at random. There's a purpose, and Mother Nature is the one who sets the purpose. And whether human beings understand it or not, that purpose is going to be carried out. So if I study critters, whether they be two-legged, four-legged, six-legged insects, eight-legged arachnids, 8 tentacles, a mollusk, no legs, a snake, but legs give you a kind of an insight into things. And if you study Mother Nature and the way Mother Nature does things, you will learn a lot. But not everybody arrives at the same conclusion, because Mother Nature makes everybody different. That's why Senator Hanson B's DNA will not match mine. All of the billions of people who have been on this earth, how do we know there are not billions of people on this earth now? Has somebody taken an actual head count of every human being everywhere on the face of this earth? They talk about finding what they call tribes that they didn't even know exist. They limited the number of people on this earth by the limitation of their own knowledge. If they don't know it, it doesn't exist. Columbus discovered America. No, he didn't. There were native peoples here already. Columbus overcame the ignorance of some people, but his ignorance led him to think he was someplace where he was not. But when white people, or off-brand white people such as Italians and Eastern Europeans do something, even they are better than every person who is designated a person of color. So their errors become the realities for everybody from that point on. How can somebody on this continent be referred to as an Indian? This is not India. Yet the people who were here originally are called Indians because some white man who didn't know what was going on hung that label on them. And they have to accept it. Not only do they have to accept it, they have to accept being humiliated, stripped of their dignity, put in what they call Indian schools, have their hair cut off, take their language from them, and teach them how to speak the language of the oppressor, then act like in later years everything is all right. Because one of them might be given something special, like every now and then a black person will be given something and becomes the poster child for white kindness and justice, while he or she enjoys, and I use that term advisedly, the contempt of everybody like him or her. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Chambers. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Awake, my St. John. That's the way Alexander Pope in his day pronounced what we would call St. John, ST period, JOHN, St. John. But in those days, English people who were scholars could change the way words were spoken. I spent a lot of time learning things from white people. I never had a black teacher in my life. White people on this floor talk about local control, and they want local control as long as white people are the ones in control. I did succeed legislatively in dividing OPS, which was the largest school district in the state, into 3 districts. And white people took it to court. And I tried to force the judge to call it to trial because I knew I would win. Then those, including the NAACP legal fund, joined some white people because they thought it created segregation. And I told them to say that segregated schools are made segregated by what I do is like saying I can make water wetter. If they would have read that law, they would have seen that the division was based not on race, but on the location of the 7 high schools and the districts that had been drawn for those high schools by the white people who comprised the white Board of Education. So what were they doing? Admitting that the way they drew boundaries segregated the schools. So I have to use object lessons. It said that each of these districts would comprise 2 high schools in 2 of them. There are 7 high schools in Omaha. So there'd be 2 in one district, 2 in the other, that's 4, and then there'd be 3 in the third one. That takes care of all 7. And you determine the population of those high schools by the districts that had been drawn by OPS that were called attendance districts. And when I attacked them on that, because that's what I did from the time I was in high school, I did a lot of things adults should do. They said, well, we're not segregating the schools. We put schools in neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods are what they are because of housing patterns. And even as a child, relatively speaking, compared to those old mossbacks, I said, you are not allowed under the law to superimpose a school district on a segregated neighborhood pattern and thereby have segregated schools. You can't get away with that. But they did get away with it because I was labeled the radical, the one who was destructive, because I took what white people did and turned it on them. And I said all that would happen is that each one of these would be a school district on a par with every school district in this state. They would have the same benefits in terms of state aid. Each would hire its own superintendent, its own teachers, establish to the extent that is allowed its curriculum, and they would have local control, meaning that the people who live in a district where their children go to school would control that school. And it was all right when white people were involved, but white people wanted to control the schools where black children went to school also. And when I pointed out that you had a white baby in the womb of a majority-minority district, District 66, created by law, segregated so that white people's children, they could run out there and they not have to go to school in OPS. Wouldn't have to go to school with black children. That was called white flight in those days, and I recognized it then, and I brought those things up on the floor of the legislature. And do you know why the 3 districts concept did not last? I and Senator Rakes, who did a whole lot of work when it came to the details, he was the chair of the Education Committee, could get statistics and things such as that. We're both going to be term limited out. We could not protect what we had done, even if the court upheld what we had done, which I believe would happen. We would be term limited out, And all the legislature then would do is pass a law and revoke what we had done. You said time?
That's time. Senator Chambers, you recognized for your third opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. President. My, how time flies. I thought I just offered my motion to reconsider. So I got to get something else up there while I'm talking. So here's what we did. We contrived what was called the learning community, and it created a consortium of schools in Douglas, Sarpy, and maybe a little bit of that throwaway district out north, Washington. And each one would elect people who would serve on the learning community board. And naturally, I was elected because people had confidence in what I would do where education is concerned. And there may have been more white people than black people in the district for learning community because it comprised more territory than these legislative districts. And that's what we did in place of that division of OPS into 3 districts. When I get my next motion up there, I'm going to have a chance to tell you the role that she's the lady senator from Nebraska out there in Washington, D.C., Senator Fisher, how I helped her get some money for rural people. And then when I was out of here, she did the treachery of saying that the people who are members of the learning community could not get that whatever it is that they gave you for each meeting that you attended. When I wasn't here, she went back on her word and changed that. Those are things you all don't know. But I thought I'd decide to go ahead and give you a clinic this morning and teach you about some of the things that happened in your white legislature while I was here that I know about. You don't have reporters who are here, they don't know it. Editors who are now editors of these papers, they don't know it. So they write superficially. I say the flag is a rag, and they run with that because they can grasp that. Yeah, this is what these ignorant people that Trump said he loves. He said he loves uneducated people. He said that because they're dumb and you can lead them around by the nose. You can shake a rag in front of them and they're like an enraged bull. So what? Because they're angry, that's going to stop me from saying what I believe to be the truth? It won't work. It hasn't worked in 40 some odd years and it won't work now. And when you all get on the fighting side of me, as you did this morning, then we're just going to deal with this the way we need to deal with it. And when I say this, I mean me taking some time. And when I pause, that's not for applause, but it's so that I can craft quickly another amendment or motion, which I'm in the process of doing. And I've gotten it drafted. So not only will I have 3 times to speak, and an opening, but I'll have a chance to deal with this motion twice. We'll deal with it the first time around, then we'll deal with it by way of reconsideration. And I'm playing by your rules. I have to play by your rules because you all are the majority. And every time they tried to change the rules to stop me, I said it would pinch them, but it won't stop me at all. And you all are the ones who suffer under your rules. My intent when I came here was to play by the rules. And my philosophy on that score was to learn the rules of the game, then beat those who I'm playing at their own game. And you know why that's easy? Because they've got the numbers and no one of them has to know anything because they can just clump together in a gang and win a gang fight because the only one who has a gang is them. And I'm the one that they come against. But since I have 4 of them that I have to deal with, that means I have to think at least 4 times as well as each one of them so I can withstand what the 4 bring against me. But they're so careless and hateful that they do things that hurt themselves too. They will do things against their own interests to try to get hold of somebody they don't like. And that person they don't like is smarter than they are. You shouldn't be surprised or offended that I'm smarter than you all. I had white teachers. I just paid more attention to them than you all did. There are some smart white people in this world.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Chambers, you're recognized to close on your motion.
Thank you. Members of the legislature, I have a confession to make. I'll be 83 years old. I think I'll be 83 July 10th, 82 or 83. When you get to my age, what's a few months, what's a few years, what difference does it make? Once you reach a certain age, you can even stop counting years. You're what they call old and nobody even cares anymore. And if you have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, oh, great-granddad, whatever you are, I didn't know you still had birthdays. Why do you have birthdays? You're too old for a birthday. I can't give you a bicycle. Children think in terms of what they're familiar with, as do other people. We can't get you a car because you're too old. I'm going to let you all in on a secret. I cannot be called to account for anything I say in debate in any other forum whatsoever. I believe in rules. Somebody at my age certainly should do that. So when I'm driving on the highway, I drive my age. And who can criticize me for doing that? And that's my understanding, that age carries certain prerogatives. And you just say, oh, I didn't remember. And when you're old, you can get away with slippage of memory, not hearing, not seeing, not perceiving, not understanding. But as black people, we learned this trick a long time ago, because when we're around white people, we're invisible. When we are the maid, when we are the cook, who sometimes would put feces and urine in the food that they fed white people. Yeah, that's what they did. You can take my freedom, then take all of me. Why not take all of me, including my waste material? And that was done. Who cared whether a cook heard something, or a maid heard something, or a butler or a chauffeur? But what white people fail to realize, I could have a doctorate, but I can't get a job doing what one with a doctorate should be allowed to get. So I have to put on a butler uniform and learn how to buttle. I have to put on a chauffeur uniform and be a chauffeur. And all these important white people, even government officials, talk in our presence as though we are not there. That's why a man named Ralph Ellison wrote a book called The Invisible Man. All black people are invisible unless you want us out there on the basketball court, on the football field, and you'll have the most racist white people down south cheering their lungs out for an all-black basketball team or a virtually all-black football team like Alabama. White people screaming because black people are in their place. When they put animals in the Coliseum and had human beings try to fight these animals, the animals were doing what those who captured them wanted them to do. So the animals could live as long as they did what those who captured them wanted them to do. But they were never let out of confinement to roam the streets or go back where they came from and be what nature intended them to be. They're always caged. They're always put into an arena to fight against human beings. And the human beings they fought against were human beings not wanted. Some of them were Christians. That's where the expression throwing the Christians to the lions came from. Oh, you were given a chance to save your life.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. And it was a fair fight. See, the lion doesn't have a weapon, so we throw you in there with him and you don't have a weapon either. That's the only way it's fair. And not surprisingly, the lions never lost. And why was that? Because the one who contrived the contest rigged it. There's no way any human being is going to beat a lion until white people got smart enough to create Tarzan. And not only could he outsmart the lions, he owned all the lions. A white guy in the jungle, owned all the animals. That's the reality. That's the mythology that people in America grow up with. And it has an impact on young minds. They're like malleable clay, and you shape and mold them into what you want. And once you got that shape, you sit them out in the sun, and it hardens, and it will never change.
That's time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask for a call of the House, but first a roll call vote. I mean, a call of the House and then a roll call vote.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. There's been a request to place House on a call. The question is, shall the House go on a call? Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, please.
19 ayes, 3 nays to place the House under call.
House on a call. All unexcused senators, please return to the chamber and check in. The House is under call. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. While we're waiting for the senators to return to the chamber, Senator Wayne would like to announce some guests today. We have with us 80 fourth graders from the Springville Elementary School in Omaha, Nebraska. With the Springville fourth graders, please rise up in the north balconies. We can welcome you to the Nebraska Legislature. All senators, please check in. The House is on a call. Senator Groney, please check in. Senator Chambers, we're lacking Senator McDonald. Thank you, Senator Chambers. We will proceed. Question before the body is the adoption of the reconsideration motion. A roll call vote has been requested. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Albright. Voting no. Sir Arch. Voting no. Sir Blood. Voting no. Sir Bowles. Voting no. Sir Bostelman. Voting no. Sir Brandt. Voting no. Sir Breesy. Voting no. I'm sorry. Senator Brewer. Voting no. Thank you. Senator Breesy. Voting no. Thanks. Senator Kavanaugh. Voting no, Sir Chambers. Voting yes, Sir Clements. Voting no, Sir Crawford. Voting no, Sir DeBoer. Voting no, Sir Dorn. Voting no, Sir Erdman. Not voting, Sir Friesen. Voting no, Sir Geist. Voting no, Sir Gregert. Voting no, Sir Groney. Voting no, Sir Holloran. Voting no, Sir Ben Hansen. Sir Matt Hansen. Voting no, Sir Hilders. Voting no, Sir Hickelman. Voting no, Sir Howard. Voting no, Sir Hughes. Voting no, Sir Hunt. Voting no, Sir Kalowski. Voting no, Sir Coulterman. Voting no, Sir Legrone. Voting no, Sir Lathrop. Voting no, Sir Lindstrom. Voting no, Sir Linehan. Voting no, Sir Lowe. Voting no, Sir McAllister. Voting no, Sir McDonald. Voting no, Sir Moorfeld. Voting no, Sir Moser. Voting no, Sir Merman. Voting no, Sir Pansy Brooks. Voting no, Sir Quick. Voting no, Sir Shear. Voting no, Sir Slama. Voting no, Sir Stinner. Voting no, Sir Vargas. Voting no, Sir Walls. Voting no, Sir Wayne. Voting no, Sir Williams. Voting no, Sir Wishart. Voting no. 1A, 46 nays.
Motion is not adopted. I raise the call. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Chambers have moved to bracket the bill until June 6th.
Senator Chambers, recognized to open your bracket motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members of the legislature, many, many years ago when I was a small lad, I was in the Boy Scouts, and one of the mottos, maybe it was the only one, be prepared. Well, I've got my next motion already prepared. So like a seamless web, we'll move right from this into the rest of my disquisition for this morning. Now, between now and when we come back this afternoon, any number of things could change. My mind could change. Israel could succeed in causing the United States to launch an attack against Iran. Then all these young white boys are going to be going over to Iran like they went running over into Iraq and Afghanistan, the way they went running into Korea, the way they went running into Vietnam. Look, after the Vietnamese whipped the French at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, shouldn't that have told the Americans something about how stupid they were? But Americans know everything. So they plunged on in there, and they stayed there for a long time. And so many of them got killed, they built a big wall in Washington, D.C. to commemorate all of those young men and women who died for nothing. The stupidity of white politicians. And you're getting something like that now. Read what happened with a ship called the Maine. And people say, remember the Maine. Now, I'm going to weave a story that may or may not be true. There was a ship that belonged to a big country in a harbor, not a harbor along its shoreline, but near another country that wasn't too far away. And something bad happened to that ship. And this big country had wanted an excuse to do something to another big country that owned this little place that was not too far from the big country whose ship it was. Well, the people who lived in this big country who owned the ship knew that there were a lot of white people in that country who were dumb. They were ignorant. They didn't know anything. So the leaders of these silly people told them that somebody on that little area where the ship was had done something bad to this ship. And since this was a big country that owned the ship, something had to be done. And what countries did in those days when they were displeased with each other was to commence hostilities. And in this make-believe story that I'm telling you, the big country that owned the ship had done something bad to its own ship, but it made the other country take the rap. They shifted the rap, as they would say in the rackets, to the other country. And the big country that owned the ship then had no choice other than to go to war. So if you update that to today, there's a big country presided over by a psychopathic, crazy person. He sent a lot of ships over into a certain part of the world that some refer to as the Middle East, because a little country called Israel, which is the tail of the dog, wagged the dog, which is the United States. Under Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel has provoked this idiot who runs the United States into taking actions against Palestinians. One of the bad things that he did was to say that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Jerusalem was of consequence because there's a division in that part of the world. And there's only one state that is recognized by the white people, and it's called Israel. The Palestinians are being occupied by these people who came from Europe. They were called Jews. And in 1948, there was a, what do you call them now? A terrorist attack against a building known as the King David Hotel. And the head terrorist was one who became the head of this outlaw neo-Nazi country called Israel. And that Israeli dog tail has been wagging the United States dog ever since. That Israeli country, I call it neo-Nazi because they learned from the Nazis. When the Nazis were doing things that were bad to people who wound up going to Israel and stealing the land from the Palestinians, such as mass or group punishment. See, Israel built outdoor prisons for Palestinians. and put them out there in those prisons, no matter how inclement the weather. That's what Israel did. The neo-Nazis learned that from the Nazis. They're given billions of dollars by the United States to kill Palestinians. They showed a picture the other day of these little children mourning a little baby sister several months old whose home had been destroyed by an Israeli missile. And they say, well, Palestinians, not all of them, but a group called Hamas or something like that. If you arrange the words, the letters, it almost comes out Shama. But they're one A short. Had done something Israel didn't like, so Israel could launch missile attacks, air attacks, blowing up buildings, houses, neighborhoods, and people. And that's what the Nazis did. But they weren't considered Nazis. But that's what I consider them. They are murderers. They are law criminals. And when that young member of the U.S. House of Representatives talked about the power that this AIPAC, this Jewish organization, wields over the Republican Party, they wanted to say she was anti-Semitic. No, she told the truth. And it's the money that AIPAC has and controls that causes these white congressmen to kowtow to Israel and lick their spit. Netanyahu said he's going to name an area that was taken from the Palestinians after Donald Trump. If Russia did that in Ukraine, what would these Americans be saying? So because this young Muslim woman properly described what Israel is doing and the power they have in this country, they said she's anti-Semitic, and that's where the Jews are smart. Anything you say against Israel is anti-Semitic, because these people in America don't realize that there are reporters, there are journalists who don't just report, there are columnists, there are editors who attack Benjamin Netanyahu and what the nation of Israel is doing more harshly than anybody in the U.S. Congress would dare to do. But Americans don't read, so they don't know. Well, when the war starts, oh, I'm old, remember, and old people's minds wander. Today I saw on the news where they showed a portion, a corner of a large oil tanker with a little hole in it. And they said Iran did that. Now you've got these missile batteries over there. You've got an aircraft carrier over there. You have a bomber fleet over there. And you got all these ships around, and somehow somebody from Iran infiltrated all of that and set off some little explosive to blow a little hole in one of these oil barges. Not a big enough hole to make it sink, but enough for this crazy man Trump to say, see what the Iranians did? You all can't get out of Iraq. You can't get out of Afghanistan. And you're going to let him put you into a war with Iran. And you think Iran will be standing alone? You think when the conflagration begins, Israel is going to be safe? You all need to pay attention to what's happening in the world, but you don't. You should be far more offended at what this president, as you call him, is doing to you than any words that I utter on this floor. But I always talk about giving, learning lessons with examples. You're more offended by words that I speak than you are by the actions that are killing agriculture in this country. Killing agriculture in this state right now. Oh, you didn't know there are people who grow soybeans in Nebraska? You didn't know there are people who grow corn in Nebraska? Why, they're the ones who send these people down there to keep talking to you about property tax relief. And you all get caught up on that little bitty thing, and you run around like a dog chasing his tail. How much tax relief do you get? Next time we have that bill, I'm going to have Senator Linehan or Senator Groney explain how the money in that tax relief. You said time?
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Colleagues, we had some guests from Senator Klowski's district, from J. Sterling Morton Elementary. They were in the south balcony from Millard. They have left, but I did want to acknowledge that they were here watching us and apologize for not being able to introduce them. Going back to those in the queue, Senator Chambers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. They're going to explain to me how tax relief is doled out of that fund that they call the tax relief fund that you all put $25 million into. How many of you all know that you get tax relief from that fund? And how much tax relief do you get? Shows how dumb you are. Yeah, the big farmers do. They got enough land for it to mean something. So you suckers from the city are taking this money that could be used when there's a bunch of it to fund some program to dole it out to these people who've got the big farms. They might benefit from it. You don't benefit from it in the city. And it is a rural city split. But the ruralies are showing not how smart they are, but how dumb the rest of you all are. So when these bills come up, we're going to have fun talking about them. And you all are going to have the opportunity to improve my education by explaining all of these things associated with property tax relief that I'm confessing I do not understand. And I'm going to have Senator Groney and his ilk and Senator Linehan explain all these things. They wanted to be the chairs. They wanted to be the brains to put this stuff together. Well, explain it to all of us, and especially somebody old like me who's a little slow on the uptake, so that I can understand. Now, I know some of you all thought I couldn't go 7 hours today. There's Senator Breezy sitting like the cat who swallowed the canary. And I say, Senator Breezy, where's the canary? He said, yeah, I don't know. And when he said that, yellow feathers come floating out of his mouth. I say, well, Senator Breezy, I see yellow feathers coming out of your mouth, and usually yellow feathers are associated with that canary that was just swallowed. And old clever Senator Breezy would say, well, no, I didn't swallow the canary. Senator, he's not listening. Senator Groney made me do it. See, I knew that would get his attention. You see him pop straight up? No, that's all right, Senator Groney. You're just background noise for me to make this point about Senator Breezy swallowing the canary, then acting like he didn't do anything. But the thing about being a member of this legislature, if you have some things in your head, you can talk all day and make more sense in 10 minutes than the legislature as a whole discussing something like property tax relief would make in an entire day. They repeat, they repeat, they repeat. When you get a chance, go look up the word shibboleth. It's not a bad word, but it's something people refer to. It's something like a test. When you want to find out where somebody stands, what tribe, what clan, what political party somebody belongs to, you put the shibboleth test on them. A lot of this stuff comes from the Bible. There was a river, and this may be true and it may not be. It was controlled by a group of people, and there were some on the other side who wanted to get across that river to escape the hostilities. So a test was given to them. Pronounce a word. And this group of people could not make a certain sound. So instead of saying Sibboleth, they said Shibboleth. Or instead of saying Shibboleth, they said Sibboleth and signed their death warrant because they could not properly pronounce a word.
1 minute.
So we put the shibboleth test on Senator Breezy, and those yellow feathers coming out of his mouth signed his warrant. He did it. The canary's gone. Senator Breezy is grinning. Senator Breezy got a little hump in his belly in the area where food makes it hump. And feathers come out of his mouth every time he opens it. The jury all concludes unanimously that Senator Breezy swallowed the canary. See, that's how those things are done. I'm giving you a little lesson on how your jury system works in America, as well as all these other things I'm saying. But I said this morning that I was very offended about some matters that came up, that continue to come up, and most of them, or many of them, swirl around racism.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Chambers, you're recognized. This is your last time other than your close.
I didn't understand you.
This is your last time at the mic other than your close.
Oh, thank you. Not only does it swirl around, what offends me, swirl around racism, but the mistreatment by you of your own kind. If you would just take care of your own kind, it would be less of a burden on me. I cannot even watch you mistreat your own kind, some of whom would mistreat me if they had the opportunity. But it's hard for me to watch anybody who's weak mistreated by somebody who's strong. Whether the one described as strong comprises an individual or will comprise a group who, because of their numbers, will have enough strength to be oppressive. I have trouble being comfortable in the presence of people being mistreated because they're weaker than the one doing the mistreating. And since I'm in a white society and I'm around white people so much, the majority of those I see being mistreated because they're weak are white people. When I listen on this floor about certain schools that don't have the academic offerings that their children need to get a decent education, they're talking about white children. Why should that make me any difference? I wish white children would get the best education available. And when I used to say that when I was giving talks around the country to black audiences, they'd say, Chambers, you must be crazy. Why do you want these white children to get such a good education? I said, because I want them to be smarter than the white adults that I have to deal with now. I want them to be smarter. And it would take education to do that. Because obviously the ones that I deal with don't have any education. And they don't need it because they've got the numbers. And they will use their numbers to get their way. And since they're using their numbers, at some point I'm going to read to you what Alexander Hamilton said about you all, and he was a slaveholder, but he didn't have respect for white people either. He said humankind is divided into two: the rich and the well-born, and the masses like you all in this legislature. The poor ones who don't have a pot to you-know-what in or a window to throw it out of. Alexander Hamilton didn't like you all. He said you were inferior, that the better classes need to be given a permanent controlling position in the government. And the reason that is, and I'm going to read his words for you this afternoon, because they gain no advantage from misbehaving because they've got all the advantages. And therefore, they have no reason to let the government go astray because the government is doing what they want. And that's what happens when you put the rich and well-born in charge. You all are unstable, you're unreliable, you're unruly. You need somebody to control you. And he was talking about white people. He was a slaveholder, but he knew his slaves had no rights whatsoever. They were owned. They were his sex toys, his sex objects. He raped little girls. And you all have some bills coming up talking about sex trafficking and raping little girls. But when those mighty white men did it, I'm supposed to overlook it. Who are the mighty white men as an example? Presidents. George Washington.
1 minute.
Thomas Jefferson. Who is that little bitty guy whose wife's name you find on cookies and rolls? Dolly Madison. James Madison. Andrew Jackson. Then one of your top patriots, Patrick Henry. And Hamilton was a Secretary of Treasury or something. Fortunately, he got in a duel with somebody that he thought he could handle, and it didn't work the way he wanted it to. But I have a chance to go into those things this afternoon, and I intend to do it. And now your colleagues are getting smart. You see how the chamber is emptying? I want to have a situation where a scripture will be fulfilled with me.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I started out today talking about how we're funding government and what we're using our resources for. And yesterday we had a robust conversation and probably a philosophical debate about tax incentives for charitable donations. I know that we have another tax incentive package coming up, and I think it's just really important that we as a body are thoughtful, and Senator Chambers is saying some really important things here about how we are treating people in this state and the lack of dignity for people in this state. And I find it audacious that we would be bringing to the floor massive tax credits and incentives for the wealthy when we're not even providing food for the poor. And I just want that on the record, that I firmly stand by that, without offering parental leave to families so that they can take care of their loved ones and one another and themselves when they need to, and without offering health insurance and access to health care, without having access to food, high quality food for children, food in the school systems. Don't come talking to me about tax incentives. Don't come talking to me about tax breaks, and don't come talking to me about tax increases. If we're not going to take care of our citizens, don't bother talking to me, because that is the most important thing to me as a senator. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Seeing no one left in the queue, Senator Chambers, you're welcome to close on your bracket motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Kavanaugh, I assure you that when that bill comes up, I'm going to have something to say about it. That's why I touched on what Alexander Hamilton said, and I will read his actual words. See, this chamber will be full when you're talking about things that might benefit the Catholic Church or some other religious school. I watched you all yesterday. I didn't come up here and waste my time because there were enough people talking about it. People popping up all over the place talking about that because the people's interests were involved who are considered important. That's when you'll all be here. But I'm watching you and listening to you even when you don't see me. And I can derail this train whenever I want to. You see what a nice guy I am? I could have been doing this all session. Today is the 76th day. That means you have 14 days left. 14 days. How much can you get done in 14 days if somebody's determined to stop you? Well, you can have an emergency meeting of the Rules Committee and shut off everybody. Then you have these bills that you have some concern about, and you can't discuss it. You cannot amend it, and you got to take it or leave it, and you'll take it because that's what you do. You know how to swallow spit. And the governor might be in favor of having that happen. I watched the way he's got his bunch of people out there, and they order certain senators to get on out there, and they go trotting out there. We ought to put a little bell on them. Then we'll know that the governor has summoned them. Whenever we hear the tinkle, 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 we know the governor has summoned them. And as that pit bull lying down by the gramophone had under his name or under his picture his master's voice, that's what they're hearing, their master's voice. Even your governor will not criticize what Trump is doing that's demolishing agriculture in this state. Why should I be interested in giving tax breaks to these farmers who are afraid to even criticize what Trump is doing that's hurting everybody? Because they're looking for a handout from Trump. I tell you, when that barn that I see every day coming down here with big red letters Trump on it, What that dumbbell doesn't know is that when he puts another coat of paint on it, that paint is going to cost more because of the tariffs from Trump. Americans have no idea how many products that they use every day come from China. When the tariff is paid, it's not paid by China, it's paid by Americans who purchase those products. So the money goes out of your pocket into your U.S. Treasury, and that's why Trump will say money is flowing into the U.S. Treasury, flowing like it never did before, because it's coming right out of you dumbbells' pockets. You don't realize that a tax is a tax is a tax, whether they spell it with 3 letters or however many letters the word tariff comprised. A tariff is a tax on you, dumbbells, and you pay it and you praise the man who's doing it. So when that guy goes to get another bucket of red paint to repaint Trump on that big barn, he's helping the Chinese. But he's so dumb, he doesn't know it. And Trump says, that's my kind of guy. Puts a little finger together and says, because you see, I love uneducated people because they don't know anything. And what I'm probably the only one who heard when he came back from North Korea that first time, he said, when Kim Jong-un spoke, everybody stood up, and that's what I want. He said, you got a child in the White House. Not only did he want everybody to jump up and take notice like he saw those thousands of people do when Kim Jong-un spoke, but you know what he wanted to do right away after that? And you all forgot it? He wanted to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring thousands of military troops to have a military parade in Washington, D.C. You all forgot that, didn't you? Didn't you? That's what your dumbbell president wanted to do, showing the contempt he has for you because you don't know anything. He wants to play soldier, and he's going to get a lot of young men and women killed for his purposes and then tell what a wonderful job he's doing. Now, when you go watch the news, look at that little bitty hole that they say is in that oil ship. And he said that somebody from Iran did it. Well, if somebody can infiltrate all those ships and get there, you all are in trouble.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Question before us is the adoption of the bracket motion. All those in favor, please vote aye.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like a roll call vote, but first I want to call to the House.
There's been a request to place the House on recall. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Please record.
19 ayes, 4 nays, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator Hughes, Senator Klowski, Senator McAllister, Senator Pansy and Brooks, please return to the floor. The House is under call. Senator McAllister, Senator Pansy and Brooks, please return to the floor. The House is under call. We all accounted for. Mr. Clerk, roll call.
Senator Albright. Voting no. Senator Arch. Voting no. Senator Blood. Voting no. Senator Bowles. Voting no. Senator Bostelman. I can't hear you, Senator. Voting no. Senator Brandt. Voting no. Senator Brewer. Voting no. Senator Breesy. Voting no. Senator Kavanaugh. Voting no. Senator Chambers. Not voting. Senator Clements. Voting no. Senator Crawford. Voting no. Senator DeBoer. Voting no. Senator Dorn. Voting no. Senator Erdman. Not voting. Senator Friesen. Voting no. Senator Geist. Voting no. Senator Gregor. Voting no. Senator Groney. Voting no. Senator Holloran. Voting no. Senator Ben Hansen. Senator Matt Hansen. Voting no. Senator Hilgers. Voting no. Senator Hickelman. Voting no. Senator Howard. Voting no. Senator Hughes. Voting no. Senator Hunt. Voting no. Senator Kalowski. Voting no. Senator Coulterman. Voting no. Senator LaGrone. Voting no. Senator Lathrop. Voting no. Senator Lindstrom. Voting no. Senator Linehan. Voting no. Senator Lowe. Voting no. Senator McAllister. Voting no. Senator McDonald. Voting no. Senator Moorfeld. Senator Moser. Voting no. Senator Merman. Voting no. Senator Pansing Brooks. Voting no. Senator Quick. Voting no. Senator Scheer. Voting no. Senator Slama. Voting no. Senator Stinner. Voting no. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Walls. Voting no. Senator Wayne. Voting no. I'm sorry, Senator. Voting no. Senator Williams. Voting no. Senator Wishart. Voting no. 0 ayes, 45 nays, Mr. President.
The motion fails. Mr. Clerk,
Raise a call.
raise the call.
Mr. President, Senator Chambers will move to reconsider that vote.
Senator Chambers, you're welcome to open on your bracket. Reconsideration.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the legislature, I should from this day on be known as the uniter, the one who unites Protestants, Catholics, Gentiles, non-believers, unbelievers, black, white, all united, unanimously. Call me the uniter from now on. I'm the only one who can do that, the only one who will do it. And when it comes to uniting all of these disparate, you all say disparate, all these disparate entities, it takes a special talent, no matter what the cause is, which they are united around. Hitler and a guy before him managed to unite Europe against Germany. But I want to digress a bit and talk more about the approaching war that you all might be in with your dumb selves. Spain is not as stupid as Americans. They had a frigate as a part of all these ships that America has had sent around Iran. And the Spanish people said, we're smarter than this. We're going to let this madman put us in the middle of something which is totally insane. How did we let it reach this point anyway? But since we are intelligent, we know it's never too late when you see you're on the wrong course to stop, reverse your course, and extricate yourself from that situation. So you know what Spain did? They removed their frigate from this group of ships that America has sent into the mouth of probably a shooting war. You think it'll bother him? He has no concept of war. He didn't even joined the military when he wouldn't have had to fight. He escaped the draft. And I'm going to tell you all something else ahead of time because you're so dumb and these white people who are supposed to be smart don't see it. Why do you think Deutsche Bank would allow Trump to default on loan after loan after loan, comprising millions and millions of dollars? What do you think Trump made it possible for Deutsche Bank that they needed a funnel to do? Have you all ever heard of money laundering? Now, nobody has mentioned that. Nobody has mentioned that the Trump outfit was involved with money laundering, but I'm telling you, when I analyze what I see, and all I see is what's on the news, all I can read is what is in the newspapers, but thinking about those things and things that have happened in the past, money laundering, I believe, is one of the things that caused Deutsche Bank to allow Trump to default, and to continue to get loans. I would like to ask Senator Clements a question, if he would respond.
Senator Clements, would you please yield?
Yes.
Senator Clements, for the record, because everybody doesn't know your stellar history as I do, are you a banker?
Yes.
Would you consider yourself to be, relatively speaking, without boasting, a successful banker?
Yes.
How many times, if I borrowed $50,000 from your bank and defaulted, how many times would you give me the opportunity to do that?
Once.
And the once would be that first time I did it?
Yes.
Well, suppose I came back and I said, but Senator Clements, we know each other, we both in the legislature, give me another chance. Give me just one more chance. Then would you give me another chance?
If you had more collateral.
Well, I don't have any more collateral. It's just me, friendship.
Your signature is a good signature, but it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be worth $50,000.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Members of the legislature, if I had some clout with the people you have representing you in Washington, D.C., I would recommend that they bring Senator Clements to Washington and have him explain to people that a person is not going to be able to go to the same bank and default unless something more than just that person's signature is involved. If there's collateral, then if I don't pay, then they can liquidate that collateral. That's what it's for. But I don't have the collateral, and I keep getting loans. There's something of value that the bank is getting, which is of greater value than the amount of money that's being lost through these defaults. And you know, Deutsche Bank has not gone under. Something is going on. And you all will find out one of these days. China has been around for I don't know how long, but longer than Trump has been. Trump, even if he wins re-election, is gone, but the damage he has done will linger after him. If these other countries, and the EU, by the way, said they're not going to be drawn into this stuff that Trump is trying to do against Iran. Iran is still a part of that nuclear treaty. So is the EU. And they were all taken aback in Europe when Trump unilaterally withdrew. And now he is threatening the world economy, easing you dumbbells into at least a recession. You know why recessions are good? Just like Trump says that tariff wars are good, trade wars are good. You know why recession is good? Because now we're all brought down to the same level. We're all in the same bag. We're all in the same boat. All of us. We now have something in common in that we don't have anything. But because you're a man and you're used to having things your way and you can't do anything to the one who caused it, you all have shown that you'll take it out on your family members. I was giving a talk in Iowa when I was going around the country speaking to the farmers that even farmers were afraid to speak to because they thought these were revolutionaries, and those are my kind of people. I told them, if you all will heed anything I say, heed this one thing: do not kill your family and then commit suicide. Commit suicide first and then kill your family. And do you know it took about 5 seconds for that to soak in, and then they laughed. They saw a point that I was trying to make. First of all, your family didn't do it to you. You might be ready to check out, but maybe they're not, and certainly not children. So why do these white men, when things go bad, kill their families? That's what you will do, because you've had an economic turn down. That's not the end of the world, but you make it the end of the world because now your privileged status has been taken away from you. You know what you fear more than anything else? Having to live the life that you were instrumental in forcing on other people. You know how hellish it was because you helped create it. And now that the hell you created is going to burn your hide, you don't want it. I'm waiting. There was something that they called a phenomenon when black troops were captured in Vietnam, Korea, and other places. The black soldiers didn't crack under brainwashing like the white soldiers did. And then some white people put it together. Well, all these white guys, they were always used to having somebody who would rescue them.
1 minute.
Whatever their problem, somebody they could count on. So they were waiting for that rescue, and it never came, and they lost their minds, and they sold out. Black guys never expected anybody to come to their aid. This is the way it is in America. Nothing different here. And they didn't crack the way these white ones did. While you all are protecting your privilege, you're also making yourself very weak and very vulnerable. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Stinner would move to invoke cloture pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10.
It's a rule in the chair. There's been full and fair debate on LB 293. Senator Stinner, for what purpose do you rise?
Good call of the House.
There's been a request to put the House under call. Question before us, shall the House go under call? All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Please record.
24 ayes, 1 nay, Mr. President, to place the House under call.
The House is under call. All those unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. All those senators, unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. The House is under call. Senator McAllister, would you check in, please? Senator Colderman, Senator Wayne, Senator DeBoer, please return to the floor. The House is under call. Senator Mann-Hansen, could you check in, please? Senator Colderman, Senator DeBoer, please return to the floor. The House is under call. We are all here and accounted for. The first question before us is to invoke cloture. It will take 33 affirmative votes. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Reverse order, Mr. Clerk.
Senator Wishart, voting yes, Sir Williams. Voting yes, Sir Wayne. Voting yes, Sir Walls. Voting yes, Sir Vargas. Voting yes, Sir Stinner. Voting yes, Sir Slama. Voting yes, Sir Scheer. Voting yes, Sir Quick. Voting yes, Sir Pansing Brooks. Senator Pansing Brooks, voting House, Senator. Voting yes. Sir Merman. Voting yes, Sir Moser. Voting yes, Sir Moorfield. Sir McDonald. Voting yes, Sir McAllister. Voting yes, Sir Lowe. Voting no, Sir Linehan. Voting yes, Sir Lindstrom. Voting yes, Sir Lathrop. Voting yes, Sir Lagrone. Voting yes, Sir Coulterman. Voting yes, Sir Kalowski. Voting yes, Sir Hunt. Voting yes, Sir Hughes. Voting yes, Sir Howard. Voting yes, Sir Hickleman. Voting yes, Sir Hilgers. Voting yes, Sir Matt Hansen. Voting yes, Sir Ben Hansen. Sir Holleran. Voting yes, Sir Groney. Voting yes, Sir Gregert. Voting yes, Sir Geist. Voting yes, Sir Friesen. Voting yes, Sir Erdman. Voting yes, Sir Dorn. Voting yes, Sir DeBoer. Voting yes, Sir Crawford. Voting yes, Sir Clements. Voting yes, Sir Chambers. Voting no, Sir Kavanaugh. Voting yes, Sir Breesy. Voting yes, Sir Brewer. Voting yes, Sir Brandt. Voting yes, Sir Bostelman. Voting yes, Sir Bowles. Voting yes, Sir Blood. Voting yes, Sir Arch. Voting yes, Sir Albright. Voting yes. 45 ayes, 2 nays on the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture is passed. Moving to the first item to be voted on, the reconsideration motion for Senator Chambers. Although a roll call vote's been requested, regular order, Senator. Mr. Clerk?
Sir Albright. Voting no, Sir Arch. Voting no, Sir Blood. Voting no, Sir Bowles. Voting no, Sir Bostelman. Voting no, Sir Brandt. Voting no, Sir Brewer. Voting no, Sir Breesy. Voting no, Sir Kavanaugh. Voting no, Sir Chambers. Voting yes, Sir Clements. Voting no, Sir Crawford. Voting no, Sir DeBoer. Voting no, Sir Dorn. Voting no, Sir Erdman. Not voting, Sir Friesen. Voting no, Sir Geist. Voting no, Sir Gregert. Voting no, Sir Groney. Voting no, Sir Holleran. Voting no, Sir Ben Hansen. Sir Matt Hansen. Voting no, Sir Hilgers. Voting no, Sir Hickleman. Voting no, Sir Howard. Voting no, Sir Hughes. Voting no, Sir Hunt. Voting no, Sir Kalowski. Voting no, Sir Coulterman. Voting no, Sir Legrone. Voting no, Sir Lathrop. Voting no, Sir Lindstrom. Voting no, Sir Linehan. Voting no, Sir Lowe. Voting no, Sir McAllister. Voting no, Sir McDonald. Voting no, Sir Moorfeld. Sir Moser. Voting no, Sir Merman. Voting no, Sir Pansing Brooks. Voting no, Sir Quick. Voting no, Sir Shear. Voting no, Sir Slama. Voting no, Sir Stinner. Voting no, Sir Vargas. Voting no, Sir Walls. Voting no, Sir Wayne. Voting no, Sir Williams. Voting no, Sir Wishart. Voting no. 1 A, 45 nays, Mr. President.
The motion to reconsider fails. Next item is LB 293. All those in favor, please vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There has been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Sir Albright. Voting yes, Sir Arch. Voting yes, Sir Blood. Voting yes, Sir Bowles. Voting yes, Sir Bostelman. Voting yes, Sir Brandt. Voting yes, Sir Brewer. Voting yes, Sir Breesy. Voting yes, Sir Kavanaugh. Voting yes, Sir Chambers. Voting no, Sir Clements. Voting yes, Sir Crawford. Voting yes, Sir DeBoer. Voting yes, Sir Dorn. Voting yes, Sir Erdman. Voting yes, Sir Friesen. Voting yes, Sir Geist. Voting yes, Sir Gregert. Voting yes, Sir Groney. Voting yes, Sir Holleran. Voting yes, Sir Ben Hansen. Sir Matt Hansen. Voting yes, Sir Hilgers. Voting yes, Sir Hickleman. Voting yes, Sir Howard. Voting yes, Sir Hughes. Voting yes, Sir Hunt. Not voting, Sir Kalowski. Voting yes, Sir Coulterman. Voting yes, Sir Legrone. Voting yes, Sir Lathrop. Voting yes, Sir Lindstrom. Voting yes, Sir Linehan. Voting yes, Sir Lowe. Voting yes, Sir McAllister. Voting yes, Sir McDonald. Voting yes, Sir Moorfeld. Sir Moser. Voting yes, Sir Merman. Voting yes, Sir Pansing Brooks. Voting yes, Sir Quick. Voting yes, Sir Shear. Voting yes, Sir Slama. Voting yes, Sir Stinner. Voting yes, Sir Vargas. Voting yes, Sir Walls. Voting yes, Sir Wayne. Voting yes, Sir Williams. Voting yes, Sir Wishart. Voting yes. 45 ayes, 1 nay on the advancement of the bill.
LB 293 is advanced. Items, Mr. Clerk, raise the call.
Mr. President, notice of hearing from the Government Committee regarding gubernatorial appointees. 134, 135, new resolutions by Senators Slama and Hunt. Enrollment and review reports LB 295, 296, 600, 600A is correctly engrossed. They also reported LB 610A to select file. Mr. President, Senator Howard would move to recess the body until 1:30 p.m.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? We are in recess.